Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of the Voices of Food Future podcast. I am your host, Nyaga. Now, if you remember, for the first episode, we had Stephanie Sargent, who came and we had a conversation about food systems. Now, today, as episode 2, as promised, we are having a conversation about who really controls our food. And remember, at the Voices of Food Future podcast, we look at the whole system from the production, the manufacturing, the processing, distribution, and even waste management. So today's episode, we have two guests, and I'm just going to read a short bio of our two guests in the studio today, and then we will jump right into the conversation. So on my immediate right, we have Mohammed Almas, who is a knowledge management specialist, deeply engaged in reshaping Africa's food systems through the lenses of climate justice, youth empowerment, and inclusive development. He brings years of experience supporting grassroots initiatives, regional networks, and cross-sectoral collaborations that center indigenous knowledge and policy innovation. Mohammed's work focuses on making knowledge actionable, bridging gaps between communities, policymakers, and global conversations to advance food security and sustainable livelihoods across the continent. Now, on my second right, we have George Kariuki, who is a systems analyst. He's also an avid part-time farmer. Garlic and onions and assorted vegetables are his specialty. Karibuni sana, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
How do you feel? Is it the first time for any of you to be on a podcast?
No, not for me.
Not for you?
Yeah.
George, for you, it's your first time?
It's my first time.
All right, Sasa, thank you very much for coming and making the time. And I think I just want to go right into it and have this conversation about food systems and food sovereignty. Mm-hmm. So if you were to explain it to the layman's language, I think I'm going to start with you, Almas. What would you say is food sovereignty?
Well, I like that, the layman's language. I think working with grassroots communities, you have to learn how to localize. So I'd say food sovereignty to me is not being a guest at my own granary.
Okay.
Yes. So not having people to decide for us, for me, what to plant, how to distribute it, and even how to consume it. Yeah.
In the layman's language. I like it. It's short and very specific. What about you, George?
I can't put it better than that. It's the right of the people
Our
actually
in-house
being,
farmer for today.
Yes. It's the right of the people to actually being able to control where their food comes from, how they grow it, who they share it with, and most importantly, understanding the value chain. It's a big problem that is developing in Africa, but most importantly, it is because of the politics of the day, I would say. So food sovereignty is one thing that we need to tackle as Africa, specifically as Kenyans, whereby we control what we eat. Yes.
I like what you've said, value chain. And I think you have gone right into what I wanted us to sort of touch on. When you speak on value chain, just give us, from your side of the profession now in terms of farming, what does that value chain look like?
It's a very fragmented thing.
Okay.
Especially in Kenya, whereby if you are to actually try to study it, if you are to actually try to understand it, you won't understand where, you'll not be able to nail down where to start. Because Kenya produces food, yes. But how it gets to the consumer, it's a very fragmented system that is enthralled with a lot of middlemen. In Kenya, we call them brokers, who really dictate where food will come from, how much it will cost, to who it will go to, and at what price. Now that on the other side of the coin means that the farmer will not control how he will sell his food, how it will get to the market. It is more or less, would say, it is dictated by several people along the way. That is the biggest problem that we are having. And as food is moving from the producer, now being the farmer, somebody like it loses a lot of things. One, it's food security. Who handles it, especially handling? How and when will it get to the market? Will it be fresh by the time it gets to the market? How much nutrition will it have lost? And most importantly, can we trace it back to the farmer? In case anything arises, like poisoning or something.
Yeah.
Yes, how can we trace it back to the farmer? Because developed nations have a way of tracking it back to the farmer from the day the production started to when it got to the consumer. At the supermarket, for our level as Kenyans, pale sokoni. Yes.
So what George is saying is, like Almas has said, we do not have the right to our granaries.
Nowadays, no. Back in the day, yeah, we used to.
But right now, and this, just for clarity, these middlemen are not government.
They are not. There's just an individual like you and I who knows, has information and knows he needs onions somewhere. He runs a hotel and he needs a lot of onions. Yeah. But how the farmer does not have that information. Because if I was to sell those onions directly to the consumer, now being the hotel, the big hotel in Mombasa, they'll be able to trace back that food back to me.
Yeah.
Hii kitungu tulinunua kwa George. No. In between, there are not so many people, whereby it becomes so fragmented that you cannot tell a certain batch of onions came from who. Yes. But back in the day, we used to control those food systems.
So the larger the scale, the more difficult it is to figure out.
Yeah, worst case scenario when you are now start adding corporates into the picture.
Wow. Okay. So now, Almas, when we speak of the risks that we run in terms of even the food security that he's talking about, and in terms of production and scaling as well, what are some of these risks in production specifically after the food has left his farm? So now, before it gets to our table, because as he's rightfully put it, it goes through so many people by the time it gets to maybe Mama Mboga, mwenye ako hapo nje, or maybe even the supermarkets themselves. So what are these risks that we run along the way?
Yeah, I think number one, my colleague has mentioned about post-harvest losses. Yeah, and it's not that we don't have these technologies to ensure that we have the minimum post-harvest losses as possible.
Yeah.
We do have the technologies, the logistical technologies, to support our farmers and all that. So it's all in the intentionality on how we program as governments, and what entry do we give partners who are willing to support these farmers. Are they intentionally blocked from supporting the farmers? Because sometimes we do confuse scarcity for mismanagement. Yeah, because you will find that we do produce. For instance, let's talk about maize. Yeah, you'll find that we import maize, maybe from South Africa, from Zambia, and worse from outside Africa. Yet you will find that our farmers here in Kenya, let's say maybe in the Rift Valley belt, they have to do away with a lot of surplus because, number one, they don't have the infrastructure for storage, adequate infrastructure for storage. Okay, there's the challenge with the middlemen, as he says, so which means it affects the pricing. Okay. So it's no longer becoming profitable to the farmers, and they're the ones who are at the core of this chain, at the center of this chain. All right, and they cannot even benefit from it, and are not getting the necessary support from it, and then worse, they do not have control over the seed. Initially I mean. A bit in the past, we used to do seed saving. So you can plant, harvest. There's what goes for consumption, and there's what is saved. Mostly it was done by elders. Elders who save the seeds for replanting for the next season. But now we're having, those are the indigenous, Now we're having the hybrid seeds that you can only plant once. You can only plant once. So every season you have to go and buy. And we're getting to the point where now you have to be certified, formally certified, to hold these seeds. So these are the risks which, conjoined with policy failures and of course our own internal, because as he said, these middlemen are not government, they're not foreigners. They're just people like on the power balances scale.
Somebody with knowledge.
Yeah, on the power, yeah, on the power balances scale, they're more powerful than the farmer. Yeah. So, for instance, in Marikiti here in Nairobi, you cannot just harvest your produce and then just bring them there and sell.
You have to.
The people who will follow you. They know the lorries actually that are allowed to enter there, the market. Okay, so they will stop you and ask you, where are you coming from? Who has sent you? What are you doing here? Okay, and then you will tell them your intentions. Okay, I have produce I need to sell. Then you will go as per their guidelines. Yeah. So whether it works for you or not. So you have to choose whether you have to go all the way back. Remember, maybe you do not have a cooler boxes, or maybe the truck you've come with does not have a reefer at the back and all that. So, you make those calculations. By the time I go back to my farm, and where am I going to sell them anyway? So you just have to give in to those demands, sell the food at very poor prices, and
So that means as a farmer already you're at a loss.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're already factoring a loss because somebody is dictating how much you're going to sell your produce for, and for you, you've already done your math. What they are dictating
is different.
Does not make sense. The math is not mathing. No.
Okay, so now when we talk about the seeds, because I'd like us to just start and then build up from scratch. We still have indigenous seeds.
Yes.
But they're just not being given sort of priority.
Yes.
Someone somewhere is pushing hybrid seeds more.
Yes.
Because you have to keep on buying them, which means definitely there's someone making a profit.
That is the trick,
From a farmer's perspective, do you have do you have the option of choosing, or is that already taken out of you?
It depends where you're coming from, because first of all, there is a policy that was drafted actually to ensure that, as he said, you have to be licensed to do so in terms of holding those seeds. There is a group that was actually on telly on Monday, Seed Savers Network. I watched the show. It was in vernacular. One of our local TV stations, it was in vernacular. And when you listen to them, they are actually trying to champion exactly what we are discussing, saving the indigenous seeds. One of our big seed companies, local ones, they do sell those seeds. But as you said, they are not being given the priority. Our food is nutritious.
Which one is more expensive?
In terms of?
Pricing. The hybrid seeds or the indigenous?
The hybrid seeds, obviously. Corporate.
Okay.
Pesa kwanza. So the indigenous seeds are more nutritious. They are personal to us. The managu, the terere. They are personal to us. You walk into back in the 90s. You walk into your granny's granary. You'll always find she has some maize seeds for next season. She has saved some. Nowadays, it's a little bit impossible to find that. Why? Because, as you said, if you buy the hybrid seed, it is only for one season. You'll have to go back to the shop to buy some more seeds. Why is that happening? Because as much as we can agree that the hybrid seed is better in terms of production, and we can use it in some instances, it is not good for everything, especially when we start losing or eroding our own seed network or our own seeds. Like you see something, you understand something like managu.
Yeah.
Managu is not something that is eaten in more or less the whole of East Africa. True. It is quite personal to us as Kenyans. Kaugali with managu. One of the many nations that I know that has tried to instill that in their people is Mexico. Mexico neighbors who? The US. Some of the seeds that they are actually using to make some tortillas is some maize that the last time I saw it in Kenya was probably in the 90s. Colored maize. Black maize, pink maize, yellowish. It looks like corn. That maize is disappearing. And for those who actually, I have a friend of mine by the name of Marshall. He's very prominent in saving those seeds. And he's trying to even give it to us as some of his farmer friends to propagate them, to ensure that they do not disappear. The only problem is, well, if you plant them next to each other, the hybrid seeds and the indigenous seeds, you lose a portion of each. Take it to the lab, the indigenous seeds. If you try and understand what is the what do you call it? The nutrition value in indigenous seed versus the hybrid seeds, they don't match up. Indigenous is far much better, and it's better for your body. You are what you eat. Basically.
Yeah, true. You are.
Yes, you are what you eat. Yes.
So that means, okay. We have indigenous seeds and we have hybrid seeds. One is being planted because of production, and it's a season. It's a seasonal. You plant it for this season.
You'll have to go back to the shop. Yes.
So when it comes to this policy, does the farmer in the ground know about this policy?
Nope. They are being alienated in terms of drafting such laws.
But it affects the farmer.
It affects the farmer. That's the shocking part.
So that means
public participation was ignored somewhere. It was passed by our legislators. The legislator is just somebody who sits somewhere and says, nay, yeah, done. But they never involve the person who actually grows their food. There's a famous saying that usually trend, I think you probably have come across it on social media, that says three times a day you need a farmer. Even the legislator. Akikunywa chai, si kuna maziwa ndani. Yeah, where did the milk come from? You get the point. Akikula samosa, I grew the onions that is in the samosa. He probably reared the cattle or the cow that actually went to the abattoir that became minced meat. There is somebody else like you probably who grew the wheat that made the samosa wrap. It makes no sense sometimes. And we are losing it. We are losing it somewhere, and it's going to hurt us probably in the next like 30, 40 years.
So if our legislators are making the laws and the farmer doesn't know, George probably only knows this because he's in a position where he has access to this information. So let's talk about my grandmother, who is in the rural areas. She continues planting subsistence farming, normal for maybe her production and maybe just a little bit for selling. How does this information get to her?
Well, how our systems have been structured, it should be very easy to get to the grassroots.
So you're saying the problem is not the system?
It's the intentionality.
Okay.
We say that public participation is an expensive endeavor, but it's a necessary endeavor. We cannot do away with it. I mean, I think we spend so much on many other things which may not be necessary. Why not spend on this? Yeah, we have enough resources to reach, because in this century people are organized. We have farmer-based organizations. Yeah, we have farmer groups, both formal and informal. All right. So convening these people is not difficult, because we have leadership structures from the national level to the local level. I mean, even some counties even have village administrators, not even ward administrators. Yeah, we have agricultural extension officers to the ward level. Yeah, who are the people who should be at the forefront of disseminating this. But what I was saying is intentionality, because as he has mentioned, we have initiatives that are ongoing. All right, like what the Seed Savers Network are doing. We have growths who are working with farmers, training them, and even supporting them on policy advocacy. But the policies are threatening these kinds of initiatives. Yeah, and it is purposely done, because a farmer will never agree to his resilience. Yes, a farmer will never agree to his resilience being taken away and sustainability, because as what we've mentioned, the hybrid seed, if you cannot use it beyond, that means it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
And that means you're not resilient. What if the multinational company decides today we are no longer manufacturing
the hybrid seeds?
Yes. So what happens to food supply? Yeah. So taking away the resilience, sustainability from the food systems, exclusion of the marginalized groups, those are the risks that we are facing, and that is what is actually skyrocketing food insecurity. Okay,
because now I like that you've mentioned farmer organizations and farmers unions. First of all, before I even go on, are you a member of any union as a farmer?
No.
Now, are there professional unions? Say, for example, because I know if we talk about a cash crop like coffee, coffee and tea farmers have very structured unions that even campaign for their policies and pricing and all that and the bonuses they get. But now for this farmer, the food, the normal food that we consume, the maize, the beans, the cereals, do we have structured unions or organizations that actually say lobby for these policies to either change or be amended, that also take part in sensitization of these policies to the farmers? So that if I am going to that farmer who is in the rural areas who doesn't have access to this information, I'll go and tell them, these are the pros and cons of hybrid seeds. Or I'll go and tell them, this is what the government is prioritizing. They are not doing public participation, but if we take your signatures, it may count at the National Assembly for them to hear farmers out. Are there these organizations, whether formal or informal, that do this work?
Yeah, speaking on the formal side, as you have said, different crops have are different structured and differently organized. But whatever the structure it is, usually we come together for a common goal, for a common purpose, and one of them is usually to advocate or to safeguard our rights. So be it a SACCO, be it a cooperative, be it an informal chama, they exist. They do exist. The question is, are they really being included in this conversation? Are they really being included? Are they heard? All right. Do they really matter in this food systems chain? Yes. What's their input, and what's the impact of their input? Yeah. Because we do have cooperatives. In coffee, we have the Kenya Coffee Planters Union. All right. In some other crops, you may not have union to that level, but go to the villages. There are very many cooperatives. Cooperatives are not just for marketing, not just for collating your produce and marketing it together and all that. But when you're doing all that, taking your produce to the cooperative, so that you can have the access to market, access to finance and all that. That is also a platform where you can voice out. Like, as farmers, these are the challenges we are facing, and through the governance structures in the cooperative, they are able enough, they are eligible to voice out, to petition authoritative bodies, the National Assembly and all that. Yeah. So these structures exist, whether informal or formal. Most importantly, the organization is there, that organizing, the people building, the movement building is there.
Right. George, when you mentioned food being imported into the country, the one thing that came to my mind was, I always ask myself, I think for the past mostly, say, 5 years or so, even the last decade, we have seen a lot of food imports into the country. We also know, I think all of us here, when we went to school, the first question that was always asked in social studies was, what is the backbone of Kenya's economy? Agriculture.
Oh, you used to call it social studies?
Oh, well, I'm from the social studies era.
For me, it's GHC, actually, yes.
For you, it's GHC.
It's GHC.
For both of you, it's GHC.
No.
I think it was the final note.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're reading from the same script.
Well, when we used to do social studies for us,
it's the backbone of
Kenya's
Kenya,
economy.
Yes.
And so it's a conflicting question that is always, and I think I'm not the only person who asks myself, why are we importing maize?
Yes.
Why are we importing sugar when our sugar companies are failing? Why do we import onions? Why do we import all these foods from even neighboring countries like Tanzania when we have our own produce? And we've already been told from the books that the backbone of our economy is agriculture. Explain to me in a very, from a farmer's perspective, why do we do that in our country?
Let me throw you a curveball.
Okay.
What did you mention in terms of it's not a question of production, it's a question of the delivery of the produced food. So something along those lines.
Resilience, sustainability?
Yes.
Oh.
As we speak right now, cabbage has dropped to an all-time low. It's not because
production.
No. Reaching the market, pricing.
Okay.
At the farm. Okay, first of all, understand this. There are two pricing models in Kenya. There is farm gate,
and
there is market pricing.
Okay.
Farm gate is a question of, I came to your farm, how much do you sell it to me? It's just like how you would walk into a factory.
From you directly.
Yes. How you'd walk to a factory and request for iron sheets.
Yeah.
Or 10 kgs of nails from the factory itself. The pricing will not be the same as at the retail level. Now, my point being, right now, there's a lot of cabbage in the market, but it is stuck at the farms because the farmer does not understand where to take the cabbage. That pricing is also affected by the fact that the uptake or the consumer is usually schools. You get it? Schools are closed. The moment those schools open up again, cabbage pricing will go up because now the demand has shot up. Now, the question here is, why so? It's because the farmer does not know that somebody in Kisumu or Turkana needs cabbage. Hawana. But how do you get the produce to? How do you ferry the produce to? And that is why he was mentioning, does the truck have a reefer? How do you move produce from Meru to Turkana before it gets spoiled? It's a question of a lot of things in between, especially charges from the local authorities, the county governments. In between, there is a lot of cess.
Yeah.
By the time it gets to the consumer in Turkana who really needs it, you need a truck that has a refrigerated truck to ensure this perishable produce gets to the buyer in Turkana. The reason why you import a lot of food, to answer your question, let me answer it from a point of garlic, which I grow a lot of. You'll be shocked to realize that most of the garlic that we buy is Chinese. We import from China. But why do we import from China? Is it that we cannot grow it? Information. What you asked about farmers groups. How can you empower the farmer to grow it locally? Then there is the policy making that allows that garlic to land and actually be sold. Now, go back to a point I had delivered earlier, nutrition. In this garlic. For somebody who knows, actually I was in the market in my locality, to be specific, Kabete sub-county. I passed by yesterday, one of, let me use the local term, Mama Mboga was selling a lot of items. Ginger, onions, etc., including lime. But what caught my eye was that she has 2 portions of garlic. There is the Chinese garlic and there is the local garlic. The local garlic is actually more expensive than the Chinese. For those who understand why. Do research on how it is grown, the Chinese one. Our soils are fertile. But we do not know, the government does not want to invest in growing, in enabling the farmer to grow food locally and for it to get to the farm, to the consumer in the best way possible. So why that happens is because the government does not want to be involved, honestly. Just recently, was it the month of March when in Western Kenya, Nyanza, the farmers were complaining fertilizer was late to be delivered to them. There were long queues at the, I think, NCPB offices where they pick up, I think, the fertilizer. Haijafika. Why? Was it because we plan poorly? In Kenya, we plan poorly for almost everything. When you leave the house, you're wearing a raincoat, akunyeshi. You get to the city, somebody's looking at you like, are you okay? Are you?
Yes,
t-shirt. The information does not trickle down to the communities, does not trickle down to the villages. In the times that we are living in, whereby each one of us holds a smartphone, it is very, as he said, it's very easy to bring those farmers together and educate them. But what role does the government play to ensure that we have food security? Take a walk, go back in time. A very, very tricky period of COVID. whereby we all realized how much we need the farmer. We in Kiambu somewhere, I remember once upon a time, guys were kicked off the roadside because they were selling produce on a daily basis in a Mercedes Benz.
Yeah, I remember.
If you remember, you can recall why.
Yeah.
Because all what they were selling is trying to get food to the local consumer. Mimi na if we grow hungry, you just walk to a hotel somewhere and eat some food. Who grew that food? The reason why we import most of this food is not because that we can't grow it. It's because that the production is affected with so many things. Most importantly, information. I have gone through that cycle whereby I was told onions cannot grow in Kiambu.
Wow.
They cannot grow in my local soil because in our homestead we have set a portion aside whereby we can grow food for our own personal consumption. When it is too much, we do sell it to the community. But the naysayers told me, no, onions do not grow here. Garlic does not grow here. Here we can only do vegetables. Skuma, managu, terere, that is what grows. You get it now? It's not because that we can't grow the food. No. It's because we can, and a lot of it. Garlic actually in Africa, one of the biggest producers, shockingly enough. A country that has, I think, 2 tributaries from the Nile is Egypt.
Yeah.
Egypt is the biggest producer of garlic in Africa. Sisi tuko namba 12 huko chini. Yes. And they have 2 tributaries from the Nile. Half of the country is almost semi-arid. Now you get it now.
Yeah. You know, it's ironic that the role of government is to create an environment where actions are done smoothly.
Fertile environment.
Yeah, in a fertile environment. But here you are telling us that it is actually the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Because we'd rather go and import than have... Okay. Now...
It's dumbfounding, I get.
When you talk of some of the countries or cities that have put agriculture or have agriculture as the backbone of the economies, because we know, like he's saying, Mexico is quite an agricultural country. We also know there are countries in Asia that predominantly they just do rice production. So what are some of these countries, and what at least can we borrow and do in Kenya? Because I don't think we can say that we have production, yes, like George is saying, production is there and food is there at the farmers, but for it to get to the consumer, because there are countries where food is cheap, and food is cheap because it may not have even the production level that we have in Kenya, but it is because it is a streamlined process from the farmer to getting to the producer, to the consumer. But now in Kenya, it is the other way around. We have a surplus, but you'll find even crops that don't need seasons to grow still have pricing fluctuation. There's a time when maybe a kilo of tomatoes will be, say, maybe 80 shillings roughly, and then there's another time utapata imeenda hadi 120. Naambia hapana, nyanya zimepanda bei. So what are some of these countries, and what I want us to focus mostly on what we can borrow to do here in terms of planning ourselves as a country, so that we also have a streamlined process in terms of food production from the farmer to the producer to the consumer.
Yeah, so I'd say these are countries that do appreciate their agency. Yeah, they do not allow multinationals to become the landlords of their soils. We're having multinationals being landlords of African soils. So the level of information flowing to the farmers and the steadfastness of the government, and the farmers, the farmer group, how they are organized, because they're given the platform to organize themselves and to voice out. I remember in Nigeria, cowpeas was introduced, GMO cowpeas, and that was shot down very fast because the farmers, the community, people were very vocal about it, and it never went through. We have countries like Burkina Faso and Mali, who are very huge in production of tomatoes and all that, but they have put policies in place that prioritize their indigenous food to other to the hybrid food. Let's just cross the border here in Uganda. I think we know Uganda for shooting down so many foreign policies and products and all that. They consider all that nonsense. But look at them. They may be having their challenges, but food, which is
not
power.
one of them.
Food is power. Food is not one of them. Yeah, because they are strong on that and they stand on that and their policies are strong. So there is nothing that these countries do that we cannot do, especially now that we stand at an even higher position. Because if you compare our economy with our GDP with Uganda's and Mali and Burkina Faso, we are way ahead.
Yep.
I mean, Kenya is one of the kingpins of Africa.
Of Africa, true.
Yeah, so it all draws down to the intentionality, as I was saying, the willingness.
But it's actually interesting you say that, because yesterday I saw reports that Kenya is now edging to overthrow Ethiopia as the largest economy in East Africa. And I was like, the last time I checked, we were the largest economy in East Africa. Mm-hmm. So when did that happen? But
yeah, must have been because of the public debt issues that keeps it going up and down. You know, but one way or another, we usually we manage to stabilize, but the methodologies we use to stabilize are what imprisons us. They leave our hands tied. Yeah.
Wow.
So
one side.
Yeah,
The
we are
wrong
not
side.
organic. We are not organic.
No.
As much as we may be proud that we are a huge economy, but it's not organic, man. It's not organically made.
Organic food. Let me give you an example of a documentary I was watching on Sunday in the afternoon. We had a downpour. I had time to go on YouTube, and instead of going for basketball, I got a chance to watch the documentary. It's under, I think, a channel by the name of Best Documentary. It's about Paraguay. Multinationals that control the seed. Big ag. They are growing now. They have taken over the most fertile portions of Paraguay, and they are growing soybean.
Okay.
Soybean. Actually, the soybean is not predominantly actually used in the country. It is exported. Yes, to Europe and to other countries for purposes of making biofuels and for purposes of biofuels alongside feeding livestock.
Yeah.
So the flip side of that, the growing of the soybean by big ag companies that are dominating the growing of soybean in the country, is what they are spraying it with that is actually affecting communities living nearby. When a company is growing soybean on almost 300,000 acres,
that's a
soybean, mechanized growing. When you look at the soybean, perfect. You think it is the most healthy crop that you'll ever harvest. But how is it being grown? What is being used to grow it? What is it being fumigated with? The journalist on the ground on that day was actually shooting the documentary. He got in the crosshairs with the crop sprayer. And he ended up starting to choke and almost started throwing up, because the smell of the chemicals that were being used was just too horrendous. Now, they went ahead and decided to research on how it is affecting the communities. One of them was stillbirths, neurological issues. Now these ones are affecting the communities that are living nearby. And some of them, the communities, the homes, the families cannot move. When they are spraying, most of the pesticides and the agrochemicals are blown over into their homes, and they end up breathing it in. Now, to the extent that it is even in their waters, if they try to grow sukuma wiki, for lack of a better example, that grows on their soils, then the crop ends up being exported. But the person growing it, the multinational growing it, they are saying that it is okay, it is good. But how did they end up getting the land? Skewed policies, a lot of corruption. Then it is harvested, it is packed on a ship, it is exported to Europe, it makes biofuel. And oddly enough, some of the companies that are growing it in Paraguay, the chemicals that they are using in Paraguay are not accepted in Europe nor in North America. You get now where everything is skewed against the farmer. Yes, against the farmer. Now, when it comes to organic produce, let us enjoy what we grow, and that is why I take pride in a country like Mexico. They take pride in what they are, for whatever food they are eating. They have a lot of pride in what they grow and how they eat it. Tortillas, there's something that they call barbacoa. The pigs roam free in the on the land. Yeah. They eat whatever the farmer consumes. That animal is healthy. Then once you consume it, you can actually feel the flavor. It is totally different from what you can consume in another country that actually allows GMOs. One of the worst things for me as a farmer that we allowed in this country that had been we had been against it being brought in was GMO. And as my colleague here is saying, food first before anything else. Once you get hungry, once you walk out of this office, where will you head? Restaurant. Looking for food. How do you expect that food is going to be nutritious for you if the methodology or the methods that were used to grow it, the person who is growing it has a whole PPE all over his body, and you expect to put it in your body with no adverse effects?
If they can spray when they are... I like where the conversation is going, because now we are tackling the how of the whole food system. And that is what I wanted us to explore. I want us to just divert a little bit and speak. Now, sadly, we do not have the representation here, but when you speak of gender in food systems, I was watching a video today by a voice within the food systems network, and she was saying in Kenya it is said that majority of production in terms of agricultural production, farmers are women, but even land ownership is less than 2% for women in the country. So why do you think gender is an issue when it comes to the food conversation in terms of sovereignty and policy making? And is there one gender that is left out? Do we need to consider, is there a difference between George Kariuki being a male farmer, regardless of whatever you're planting, and say, for example, Susan being a female farmer planting the same thing? Is gender an issue when it comes to food sovereignty and consideration of farmers in Kenya?
Yeah, it's definitely it is. Okay. And of course, gender inclusion, it's very very key when you're having a food systems discourse. So number one, when we've talked of the contribution that women make towards, so it's in a traditional setting, you'll find that yes, it's the men who own the land, but who manage who manage the land, it's the women.
It's the women.
So the formality of which I think this is something, because tackling culture, because that's traditional culture.
Yeah.
Tackling that it's possible, but may take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but through our policies. Because let's say if maybe a woman does not agree with the husband, the woman needs to access finance, and you need collateral. Does not have the land title, so that means the woman cannot access finance to do some progressive work around the farm and all that. Yeah. So if it's not a collaborative family, then that's unfortunate. That ends there. Yeah. But of course, we can structure our policies in ways that we don't necessarily have to use the traditional systems of collateral. Yeah. We can have many other conventional means that can be considered as collateral, so that anyone can access credit or finance to be able to do progressive work on the farm, contribute meaningfully to food production. So it all lies in our policy. How do we structure land rights for everyone? How do we structure land ownership to make sure that it's equitable, so that when we're having certain barriers such as traditional cultures, we're still able to maneuver. So gender is a very strong issue, and a lot really needs to be done. Yeah.
Okay, George, I want to hear your voice. I specifically want to know when it comes to, now let's not talk about women as part of a family's unit. If you are going to your buyer, for example, let's say a large scale buyer, is a woman discriminated compared to the man in terms of the food that they offer, in terms of pricing? Are they given a higher price or a lower price? Because I know, for example, in car insurance, insurance companies give women lower rates because apparently...
Careful.
Exactly. Women have the notion, there's a notion that women are more careful.
They are keen
on the roads, exactly. So women are a profitable, market for insurance companies.
Less risky, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So when it comes to farming, is it the same or is it different?
Totally different playing field.
Okay.
Totally different perspective. It's actually the opposite. They tend to be taken advantage of. The notion being applied here is that, one, as he said, agricultural issue, she doesn't own the land. Why is she selling it? Why is she selling it? Or at whose behest? That is the question that lingers in almost every other buyer. And now that is where now the taking advantage comes into play.
Okay.
She must not have grown it. She doesn't have the knowledge to grow it. It is too good to be true. Secondly, where is your husband? Anajua. Has he consented? Now, the buyer might tend to want to take away, but they tend to play mind games with them. The mind games are applied on the fact that she does not have the information that we have kept belaboring here about what is the price at the market. Since she's not in the know, she has not been to the ground to understand what is today's pricing that, as you said, keeps fluctuating like a stock market share. They will tend to take advantage of them. It's unfortunate, but policies need to be there. Those policies, I think they need to be drawn up as soon as possible. But most importantly, there needs to be a framework that will come into play that involves the farmer. A farmer like me who will tell them, I've been there, I've done that. Yeah. It has happened to me. That is not the direction to go. Because anybody, I believe, with the right information in the age of technology that we are working with, AI and all, that keeps developing day and day, you can become a farmer. But the most important thing is, are you doing it the right way? What tools do you have at your disposal? You get it. Now, women, they tend to be taken advantage of a lot. And not many of them, oddly enough, have the right tools to do it right. They will, oddly enough, it's still culture. If she wants to grow onions, she will consult the grandmother. The grandmother's playbook is stuck in the 1960s when she was her age. In the now, the today, they don't have that information. It's totally different. Yes. Insurance, farming, is only bit really. Very different.
I think as we are progressing, we are realizing that one of the biggest issues is, one, misinformation or lack thereof, and two, policy making as well.
Yes,
it is a big problem.
Yes.
Almas, when we speak of the power that the multinational companies George has been mentioning, really, and how much power they wield in terms of now leave alone even the middlemen. Let's now talk about the head of the chain, mwenye ako hapo juu kabisa. How much power do they really hold in terms of this the whole ecosystem? Because as he's saying, they determine the pricing. They push hybrid seeds more than the indigenous ones. So how much power does this span? And is this something that has been building over time? Is it happening just in Kenya and Africa as well? Just give us a brief overview of these multinational companies and how much power they wield, especially in terms of right from the beginning, the seed itself.
And sadly, it's not even just the seed, including the inputs. So they use dependency to hold on to you. They determine what kind of farm inputs that you're supposed to use, and they're going to determine the availability of them. As you've said, the huge lines he was talking about, people waiting for the fertilizer and all that. And imagine we have our own organic fertilizers which are eco-friendly and sustainable and all that. But there's that dependency that is being created. So that means no fertilizer, no planting, no food. All right, let's import whatever and something like that. So maybe to answer in a nutshell, the kind of power they yield, just picture this. A farmer, maybe let me pick Bungoma. A farmer has land, availability of rain, has the skills, but cannot plant until you're given the permission. Yes. That's how powerful they are. You have to be certified.
Shamba ni yako?
Yes. Skills uko nazo. You have the skills. Yeah. I mean, the resources are there.
Yeah.
But you cannot act. Why?
Wow.
Until you're given a green light. I think that is the simplest way I can define how they wield their power. And it has been building over time, and it is not just Kenya. So many African countries, not just even Africa, I would say developing countries, even in the small islands, developing states. Let me say global south in general. We are really struggling with this. We are really fighting this. I mean, you've seen movements all over Africa. We have right to food, food for futures, food for Fridays. All these are initiatives fighting the same thing. We've had Greenpeace collecting petitions from people from the global south, farmers and everyone in the ecosystem, to stop these fertilizers, which are being, these poisonous pesticides and fertilizers which are being circulated in our markets, in the global south. Yet where they are produced, they are banned. Yeah. So it's not just Africa, it's totally the global south, and it's something that is building. And the more we keep on just standing by and watching, they will keep on wielding more and more power. As you can see, GMO had been banned in Kenya actually for about 10 years. I think it was in 2022, 2023. It was when the ban was lifted. And what was the rationale? Food insecurity. Oh, we do not have enough food. We need to diversify and all that. And that's where we're headed. Really sad.
Wow. George, from your perspective as a farmer, when you speak of, no, because you're not in Bungoma, so let's, because the good thing is I'm happy we can get his perspective now, like Almas is saying. How have you experienced this challenge of, let's say, middlemen or even these multinational companies, and has it hurt your bottom line in terms of profit?
Middlemen is a daily occurrence.
Okay.
Yes. That one is a daily occurrence. You can't avoid it. Why I say so is because no matter what you produce, like he gave a perfect example of Marikiti. It was actually, if you search on probably YouTube, one of the local TV stations covered it using one of their journalists, whereby he went all the way to Nyeri to buy green maize, what we usually call mukohoro, for boiling and for maybe roasting. He went to several farms, and the very instance, not this, he went to 3 different farms, but in every farm, there was somebody who was selling on behalf of the farmer, and yet they are not the farmers. Who are they? Brokers.
In the farms?
Yes. He knows that farm, the farmer who owns the maize. They have a conversation over the phone. I'm selling for this much. He does his calculations, gives the journalist of the day, the buyer of the day, his figure. They disagree, he moved on. Second farm, third farm, same thing. Then eventually he decided, can't go back to Nairobi without the produce. He decides to buy from one of them. And they agreed on the pricing. The funds were sent to the broker, not the farmer. He took away his cut, sent the rest to the farmer. Then the guy harvested, drove all the way from Nyeri, all the way to Marikiti, oddly enough. The moment he landed, there was another broker who is dictating the price of the day. And it's at 2 a.m. in the morning. Something that I have gone through because as you're coming up in farming, you'll have to encounter some of these guys along the way. As you're teething. I have encountered them. In my locality, my own very own market. 3 a.m., you'll find somebody who is actually now telling you how much you're going to sell your spinach today. Spinach, a vegetable, perishable. You woke up around midnight, harvested, 2 a.m., you're at the market. Somebody now starts dictating how much you're selling it for.
And if you don't agree, you won't sell in that market.
You won't. You can sell. You can choose to sell and stick it out, but it will take longer. But the moment you say yes, flies off your so-called pickup, flies off your mode of transportation for the day. Beba, then you are done. Yeah, the broker is everywhere. The food systems that he talks about in terms of big multinationals, that is the bane of Africa, for me personally, as an African. As a Kenyan, same thing. We allowed GMOs. They control everything. To the extent, he gave a very perfect example of Bungoma, whereby, yes, you have all the resources, as he narrowed down, all the resources. But you cannot plant now. You have to wait. Then probably if you plant, and oddly enough, this is a case that was adjudicated in US, whereby a farmer grew a certain type of crop, maize crop. It was pollinated by... There was cross-pollination between two farms, and I think either they both sued each other or the company actually sued, the multinational sued them.
Yeah.
It is one court case that I seem to understand. We are losing the so-called food sovereignty, whereby we are giving somebody else control over how we produce our own food. And the nutrition of what we are getting back in terms of those GMOs, it's not something that we need to actually have a conversation about. Just say no.
Yeah.
Let us stick with what we know. Producing food in Kenya is not that complicated. The resources are there, but the information is not there. The resources I tend to talk about is, he mentioned very well, we tend to stick with rain-fed. When the rain ceases, we start suffering. Turkana, tunaanza kufanya mchango. Sijui apelekewe chakula.
Yeah.
Considering what Trump is doing right now, I don't know who is going to feed them. And they are in Kenya. Ni wetu. Yeah. They are Kenyans just like you and I. But getting that food to them is a problem.
Yeah.
Why? Because of a lot of systems, control systems in between, the policies of the day, the lack of participation by the government, or the interest by the government being the biggest stakeholder. You cannot produce food in your own farm. Remember where we came from with COVID. I remember during COVID, I went to one of the seed companies here in Nairobi. There was no seed available.
There was a seed shortage, I remember.
Yes.
There was a time when there was a seed shortage.
And oddly enough, note this with a lot of keenness, it was the local vegetables that we consume. Kanzira, managu, skuma, hakukwa. All the shelves were empty. But you will not find somebody rushing to plant maize that much. Why? Because if you're going to take 4 months, 6 months to grow maize, in 4-6 months, you'll be dead from hunger. But let us agree on one thing. We can grow food oddly enough, we can grow food in Kenya all year round. Under irrigation.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of what he was saying at the government of the day wants to say we have food insecurity. No. It's the policies, the framework that we are working with, and the systems that are being allowed to dictate us. No, it's very wrong. Very wrong.
As we near the end, I am personally a champion for solutions. So
yes.
we have had a conversation which has been very enlightening in terms of the challenges you go through and the how of before the food gets from the farm to the tables. Now, at Vice Versa Global, we also champion solutions journalism.
Yeah.
So now, what are the solutions, or what are the possible changes that we can make in terms of, and this is a question I'll throw to both of you, the solutions that we have currently are ongoing, or things we can also implement and introduce so that we can mitigate these challenges that we have in our food systems?
Yeah, so one, I think Africa as a continent, we need to like come together and have counteractive measures. So we do have our own indigenous produce. Let's patent them.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's give each other priority in Africa over their usage, their storage, and all that. Because if we talk of indigenous food like sorghum and millet, yes, they're indigenous to Africa, but not to Kenya. Originates from Chad. Chad is in Africa. So it is just a matter of having that priority. So the same way they're doing business with us, we should do business with them the same way. Safeguard our own systems. We need to streamline our policies. We need to make sure that we amplify and we include the voices down there of the farmers, of women, of youth who are actually struggling to get into food production. And so we need to streamline our policies. We need to safeguard our futures. We need to safeguard our food sovereignty. Let's take charge of what we own, and let's benefit fully from it. So it's very easy. I mean, right now we're having the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is looking into, eliminating some of the trade tariffs, easing trades, cross-border trading between Africa. But many countries are yet to adopt it. Many countries are yet to align to it in Africa. I think we need to fast-track that, which will align so many things, so many economies, not just even in food production. So as a bloc, we need to stand strong, and individual countries in Kenya, we need to streamline our policies. We need to take charge of what we own. We need to prioritize our own people, our own systems, our traditional and indigenous systems. They should come first. The others should come maybe as
play second fiddle.
Yes, if you want to go buy the inorganic, the hybrid,
they're there,
the
you
GMO,
go buy them.
You go buy them. But it shouldn't be in a place where you are tied that this is the path that you should follow. And if you do not follow this path, then you are a criminal. Yeah.
Because that is how it is right now.
Yes.
Okay. How about you, Joyce?
I'll borrow a word that he just used. Let us not criminalize agriculture. Let us not criminalize farming. You can do without a lot in this world, but food. I've seen quite a number of Americans who have trying to go back to the grassroots, where they are teaching their citizens to do something known as foraging. Foraging is just walking into Kakamega forest and looking for something edible, and you'll be okay. But how long can you survive without food? I don't think that long. Let us, like he said, let us look at the framework that is dictating what we are doing. Let us come up with our own local solutions, not borrowed. Yes, you can listen to the borrowed, but is there a way that you can rework it for your own?
Tailor-made for us.
Tailor-made for Kenya, tailor-made for Africa. Something that we borrowed that to me to this day does not make any sense is counties. That is one of our biggest mistakes. What we had was working, but somebody decided we need to look like the US. No, let us come up with our own African solutions to some of these problems. The great minds are there. The youth that can come up with such solutions are available, but we are not enjoining them in such conversations. That's the unfortunate bit. When I tell people that I am a farmer, they usually look at me or stereotyping me. Are you sure? One of the many jokes is usually when I introduce myself as a part-time farmer, upon shaking somebody's hands,
Your hands are
smooth.
These are farmer's hands.
Very question. You know, you can in Africa we tend to look at farming as a retirement job, for lack of a better. It's a gig for the retired.
Work in the urban place, ukimaliza
rudi kalime shika jembe. But there's guys who are actually doing quite well through farming, and the solutions should start with the bare minimum of understanding that our seeds are our seeds, and what can our seeds do for us? How can we use them to feed our population? There's a researcher at Carlo. I don't know whether she still works for Carlo, but she did quite an in-depth research on our indigenous vegetables, specifically the managus, kanzira, tere, etc. And she discovered that those vegetables hold a lot of nutrition that is important to our bodies as Kenyans.
Yeah.
Hii mambo ya kuomba vitu kutoka nje, tafadhali tuache. Let us rework, let us understand the framework that we are working on. Let us look at that paper. Let us look at that policy and see what is not working for today.
Yeah.
It was working probably in the 70s. How are you going to compete with big ag when they are the same people who are doing lobbying chini ya maji with our legislators? And the same legislators are the ones that are skewing the farmer.
True.
We cannot continue like this. And I totally agree with you when you say that policy needs to be for Kenya. Then Africa can borrow from Kenya. Let us ensure that ourselves we are secured. The GMOs, let us, for the time being, before the science dictates and tells us differently about GMOs, personally I do not recommend them. If you want to go to the hybrid, like he said, yes, but do not be dictated that you have to grow hybrid. No. Yeah. There are other onions, there are other vegetables, there are other maize crops that can do wonders locally. And they are suited and adapted for our weather, our country. We should be working with such. My problem is actually with policy. My fight is with the legislator. And the other tricky bit that we probably should not forget to discuss, over subdivision of arable land. That one pains me a lot. Let me stick to being a Kenyan. Brote maguta. That thing just drives me up the wall every day. Because that is like in Kiambu. Kiambu, when you look at the south, or heading all the way to Western Kenya, that is the most arable land that we can work with. The other ones, that the likes of Turkana, Marsabit, Moyale, Garissa, etc., it needs a lot of investment for irrigation. But this one is rain-fed. It is the most arable. And we are subdividing it at a very fast rate. There is no commercial on TV
that doesn't.
During probably news or a movie or something that does not have an advert for 40 by 100 portions of land somewhere. And when you look at that land just needs water and a seed. It will grow anything you wish. Americans come from abroad. Guys come from Europe. They will look at ourselves and they'll be like, do you realize how much wealth you have in Africa? Do you know how much food you can grow in Africa can actually, it is, the research is there. We can feed the world. Africa can feed the world.
Absolutely true.
But our legislators, without no shame in their body, they will leave Africa to go all the way to talk to Putin to allow ships to bring grain to Africa, but they never bother to ask a simple question: can we do it at home? What do we need? That's the bare minimum.
The common phrase there
is
food
the bare
home.
minimum of what we need to do. Let us sit down and ask ourselves, what can we do? And as I was talking to you earlier in the lobby, I was telling you that I agree with what Trump is doing, taking away the so-called donor, everything donor, all the resources USAID, because it will allow us to look at ourselves in a different perspective. Oh, they have taken it. Oh, so what can Kemri do? By the way, can Kemri produce? Can it be done here? You need that it is triggering a question that nobody has ever bothered to ask themselves for probably the last 30-35 years, whereby we get every resource that we need from them. And that is the reason why they still keep controlling us. The corn that most of the corn, America is actually realizing it now. The corn that is grown, most of the corn that is grown in the US used to be shipped to China for biofuels and feeding of livestock. But recently the Chinese sat down and asked themselves a simple question. We can't do it at home. Now, that is when there is a tiff. That tariff tiff between the US and China. Because now they've ceased buying the corn among other products that you know. Now China is reworking its systems and asking themselves, can it be done locally? Yeah. What do you as the farmer need to grow it, to feed us?
So that we create the necessary environment for you to grow it.
Your environment sasa ndio inafaa kuwa hapa nchini. Tuilete hapa. Yes.
I like what you said about subdivision of arable land, because it's not just if you notice, actually it's a very strategized advertisement portfolio, because for the average Kenyan who is looking to buy land, say maybe 40 to 45 to 50 years, that person is being advertised to on TV. For the young person, there is a deliberate, very focused advertisement on social media for land buying, for the person.
Paid adverts.
Paid advertisements, yes, exactly. Yes. You will not, trust me, on Instagram, you'll not scroll without probably seeing maybe your favorite influencer, or even just advertising a piece of land somewhere. Yeah. And you know, it looks very, very enticing.
The zoning laws are very weak.
I think.
Because in a country like the US, you cannot subdivide. You know, when you work, most of our content comes from the US, oddly enough, and nowadays China with the likes of TikTok. When you look at, when I look at some family farms that have been owned for, now we are talking about the 5th generation.
Yeah.
You hear them talking about 3,000 acres, and they have been farming it for 5 generations. If you were to walk up into the local authority and request for it to be subdivided into Boroti Maguta,
you will not be
allowed. The county itself, the state itself, will actually offer you to buy it from you. Because whatever reasons you give forth, if they don't make sense, they'll tell you, no. How much?
Yeah. They
buy it, then they sell it to another farmer to continue with whatever you're doing. Why? Because they respect food security, food sovereignty. Yeah. Yes. Hatujafika hapo. And it, like I said earlier, it is going to bite us very hard in the next 30, 35 years when we've lost control over almost everything.
Unless you change something.
And it is now. Not tomorrow.
Right now.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, lastly, I want to ask you one last question. And I think as you're beginning the podcast, I told you that I want your raw answers. So here's that question now. It's actually not a very difficult question. The question is, if you were to redesign Africa's food system from scratch, what would you start with? Who wants to go first? If you were to redesign Africa's food system from scratch, what would you start with? Where would you start?
Yeah, that's. I'm tempted to mention a few things, but I think we'd start with land. Yeah, I think we'd start with land. Yes, that is the basic. That is the basic. How we define land ownership, how we define land rights, and for everyone.
Yeah.
And for every category of community, because you find in some communities we have communal land, which in some type of way it makes them even more vulnerable to exploitation and all that. There's some areas where actually you don't have title deeds. Yes, just some what they call a deed plan, which something makes you or something certificate which
sort of proves
sort of which makes you vulnerable as well. And then now when it comes to planning, now what he was actually mentioning about subdivision of arable land, I think we need to be intentional with our laws, where this is the space where you are allowed to develop. This is the place where agricultural activities only allowed. Okay, so zoning, and that actually even goes into how urban planning is done.
Yeah.
We need to be intentionally zoning.
Yeah.
This is for development, for residential. This is for development for commercial purposes. This is for food production, and that's how it should stay. You see, like the same way we are almost losing a portion of Karura forest. If we have laws to safeguard that, this being the only rainforest in Nairobi metropolitan, bottom line, yes, with biodiversity. The bottom line is it should never be touched for whatever reason. For whatever reason, it should never be touched. The same way we need to structure our policies around land. So I think I would start with land, and there's so many things I'd go to, but land, land would,
that would be your starting point.
Yes.
All right. I hope Ujapatia George Mox, but
No.
How about you?
I can't put it better than that. With the moment he said the bare minimum, let's start with land. The soil, taking care of our soil that produces the food.
Yeah.
That's close to my heart, and I agree with him. It's the soil. Then now we can come to food markets, local food markets. Let us respect them. Something that is grown in your locality. It is well championed in the US, whereby they call them farmers markets, where a farmer will produce local food.
Yeah.
Mayai, carrots, spinach, and then there is a specific day they take them to a collective whereby the local authority gives them a whole car park. Come display your wares, no fees, just for Saturday. And nowadays, majority of since the COVID era, majority of them have come to respect such. The other one is gender equality. Gender equality in the sense that if my wife wants to produce food, to grow food in the inheritance portion of land that I was given by my father, go ahead. If she wants to involve me in it, no problem. There should be a law that allows that she can go grow it. Maybe she might not own it directly, but she should be respected enough to grow it, and the community should respect her enough to buy from her. Yeah. The most important thing is that one. And you see, for me, if I was part of the legislature, I would recommend zoning laws to be practiced strictly as he had broken it down. If this is land for growing food, if you want to subdivide it, come up with a good reason. Yeah. If you want to, like now in Kiambu, oh my God, has been a mushroom of apartments, apartment blocks almost everywhere. Exactly where you can grow that food. Now as we speak, as recent as Saturday, one of the mamambogas in my area realized that I do grow food at home and I had surplus. She didn't know. I had to tell her. Because to her, the further she can go is all the way in a neighboring town where the so-called local market is there, known as Wangige. That is where she has to go there early enough, buy from the producer, probably another broker in between, then take it back to the kiosk, then sell it. That is the bottom line. Then let us respect the fact that with climate change is affecting Africa and East African and hitting it really hard. Adversely, actually. Adversely. Yeah. As recent as what? Last year. Tulikuwa na El Nino. Ilibeba chakula karibu yetu yote. It was almost, some areas that produce most of our maize, hawakuweza kulima. Why? Because the rain was too much. Then, all of a sudden, everything is drying up. Jua ndio hiyo imewaka. We need to keep up with the times. We need to come up with policy frameworks that can actually address some of these issues. And one of the key aspects that I don't want us to forget is as a farmer, weather forecasting. That is an aspect that the government has totally forgotten. Idagoreti ko hapa. Walisahau.
Climate information systems.
Yes. It is funded by no. I'm forgetting IGAD. They work hand in hand with IGAD. Some of the systems that they use there, if somebody was to come from probably NOAA, a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency in the US, aingia hapa, they will not look at it twice. This is what, oh my God, see ya.
Disappointment.
Yes, because those systems are stuck in the 70s. I looked at a preview of Dagoretti that was running on TV some time back. Wow. They are running on a CRT monitor. My God, I was in shock. A CRT monitor. A radar system that is running on CRT monitors. When there are companies now that are actually trying to integrate AI that can forecast weather a year in advance through models. Watu hapa sijui kama wanajua model. Ni labda tuongeleshe tu pole tu hata. But bottom line is forecasting, gender equality, land use, zoning, and the soils. The soils in Western Kenya, I recently learned that through a research paper I was reading, that they are too acidic. Some food crops cannot grow in such areas. It is disappointing, but the solution is there. Then lastly, wazazi wetu ambao wanamiliki mashamba makubwa, wacha kuogopa watoto wako wakijaribu kulima hao mashamba. The best thing you can do is tell them, go ahead, but remember, I own it, I need to be consulted.
It is mine.
That is all. Whatever they do with it, I believe as a parent, the most beautiful thing is
your child succeeds.
I'm proud that they are doing it. Mimi nilishindwa, uzee inanisumbua. Go ahead. And probably they'll do wonders with it. And at the end of it all, you'll be proud to say, yeah, I like what you're doing. That's all.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. This has been a really insightful conversation. And I think anyone who will listen to this will learn a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the podcast recording for this specific episode. We were talking about who really controls our food. And I think today we have done a really good job. We have spoken to our legislators, we've spoken to our parents, we've spoken to even the international community when it comes to the food systems in Africa and food sovereignty. And one of the things that we've spoken about in terms of the solutions that we can have is patenting our food, our seeds specifically. We have talked about zoning, we've talked about even gender equality and how it plays a crucial role in ensuring that we have food sovereignty and food systems advocacy in our country, as well as sticking to what is ours and revising our policies. I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to look at, revising our policies for them to match what we have in the 21st century.
Yes.
Because I think it's not just in farming and our food systems. Across, I think we have very outdated policies that are still being used to date to govern what we have. Thank you so much for listening. One of the ways that you can play a role is by sharing, watching, and commenting and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is information that you do not want to miss out on. Now, catch us on the next episode, which will air on every Monday on Voices of Food Future podcast. I have been your host, Caleb Nyaga. Thank you very much, gentlemen, as well. I have been joined by Mohammed Almas and George Kariuki. Until next time, kwaheri. Would you want to say something? Final words. Final words.
Yeah. So final words. Let's protect our own. Yeah. Let's protect our own. Let's embrace co-leadership. Yeah. I think that's what I would say. Let's safeguard our own. Strongly safeguard our own. Yeah.
Okay. How about you, George?
The legislators of the day, policy. Try and champion that policy because you are the ones that control everything that encompasses the laws of the country. And as he has said, let us champion, let us protect our own, let us lift each other up. Most importantly, the youth of today. Let us lift each other up. Let us embrace what we have today. Let us try and feed well, feed nutritiously. And before I forget, shout out to one of the advocacy groups. I almost forgot, that are championing nutritious feeding from what we locally grow. Food Fiti. There's a company known as Food Fiti. I've seen what they are trying to do, and I like what they are trying to do. I came across them recently, and I enjoyed having a conversation with one of them.
Okay.
Wako sawa.
All
So
right.
that direction, waendelee hapo. Asante
So,
sana.
thank you so much. Remember, food is power. You can catch Voices of Food Future on our YouTube platform at Vice Versa Global on YouTube. You can also catch it on where you stream your podcast from in audio format on Spotify, Amazon Podcast, Apple Podcast, and wherever else at Sema Africa. Remember, it is Sema Africa with a K. If you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us on our social media platforms, Vice Versa Global, across Instagram, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Until next time, kwaheri.